Welcome everyone to another Fight Chat Friday. Adrian and Richie here having a little chat about the Blitz. So one of the kind of common things that comes up in terms of us looking at matches is you have a look at different fighting styles, and over the last few years the Blitz, that is to say direct attack with the hands from kicking range, has been really popular with certain countries and certain competitors, particularly in the male divisions. And recently it's been changing a little bit. There's been a slight evolution in how the technique is carried out. So we decided we'd have a look at, we'll say, some of the guys that are well known for it, some really good examples and exponents of the technique, and have a chat through the different ways that you can use it and build it into your sparring game, the things that can go wrong, and maybe even looking at some ways to counter it. So might just have a quick look back to the World Championships in 2017 again, and just one little clip just to kind of set in people's minds what we mean by the Blitz, because okay, that's a word that we use the whole time, but maybe it's not a word that other people use. And this one is just a direct off the spot Blitz really from Colm Carroll. So we're really looking at, you know, what we would consider guys standing at kicking range. You'd expect maybe the legs to go first, and it's directly in with the hands, finishing with the leg. Nice explosive movement, really clear scores.
Yeah, so like as the word says, Blitz, it's something that happens quite explosively and very quick. It originally would have come from maybe karate and then translated into point kickboxing, which then translates into ITF Taekwondo a little bit. So you can see it's just as you said there, it's a very important fact that you're going from that further out range rather than being in that short punching range. So you're transitioning through those ranges quite quickly, and I think that's the important factor of what a Blitz is.
Yeah, and lots of different ways to set it up. So this was, you know, one of the few examples you'll find where it looks like it's going off the spot and directly, and it's rare enough that happens, and usually there's some preemptive movement that brings it. And in this case, Colm's opponent has just shifted in slightly, he's tested, and Colm has gone directly from that. And this is something that you might see more in a counter Blitz, you know, where the person has shortened the distance by kicking, or, you know, you've reacted to the kick by letting them land just outside a range, and then you can go off of your spot. But it's very very thrown just directly. So looking a little bit at some examples of here, where there's a little bit of an angle step first. So Colm there and Alameen being some of the examples for this one.
Yeah. So to the untrained eye, you might say, okay, it's just a rush forward, but there's actually a lot going on here. A lot of setups and rhythm changes, and you got to manipulate the distance a little bit. So you can see here one of the ways that these fighters do that is through a little angle step. So they will just take a little bit of a side step and rush through. So there's two advantages of using this. Number one, it takes you off the straight line, which is usually a direct counter will be a straight leg side kick, defensive side kick.
Yeah.
So that slight small angle will just take you off that straight line of it. So at least you're not running into it directly. And the second advantage it gives is just a little bit of a break in natural rhythm of the fight. So there'll be a lot of push, pull on the footwork. And then all of a sudden a side step just breaks that rhythm a little bit. So it changes the rhythm from 1-2, 1-2 to 1-2-3. And that just sudden shift of rhythm just gives you that half a second maybe to get an opportunity to get in. And that's kind of how the Blitz is scored. Any clear Blitz where the referees will see cleanly will, because for a second the opponent will be in almost no man's land.
Yeah.
So they're just kind of trapped for like half a second, almost mesmerized, and that's just because of that slight rhythm change. And that's how guys get very clear scores with this one.
And what I do like about the angle step before the Blitz is, like, anytime you're going to hands, if you can have your feet in better position than your opponent, it really limits their ability to punch back. So if you can be the one with the foot on the outside as you go into that Blitz, it really does make it difficult for them to square up the shoulders and actually get anything behind their punch. And that one's a good example there.
Yeah, he's almost behind him there.
Yeah. And I think that gives huge advantages as well to giving you a little bit of continuation and improving your ring position out of it. And that's kind of like a 2-for-1. So if you can get a score and improve your ring position, or maybe get a warning out of it as well, that's a huge advantage to you in the match. So a slightly different footwork choice then is just and probably the most common one is just the shortening step. And when I was pulling out some clips for this one, I just said I'd leave these few in together, and these ones are all Colm Carroll, I know, but it's one of the guys we'd be most familiar with, training with him over the years. And really what we're looking at is each time it's just set up with a slight shortening of the distance between him and his opponent, and very short, very quick steps, and just find yourself at slightly the wrong distance and he can explode.
Yeah, and it goes back to just that point we made earlier. It's that twofold thing of distance is being shortened, and also you have that rhythm change as well.
Yeah.
So it's very important. Like you might hear different names for this. It might be called a test step, a fake step, a shortening step. So it's basically just you using your front leg to just have a little short test of the distance. And what that does is it just gives the opponent just for almost a second, they're not sure whether you're going to launch forward or not. And then for that second, it gives you an opportunity to hit them on the rhythm change and to explosively go forward while having the bonus of shortening the distance, and also having them just almost trapped for that split second, like we said earlier.
So just to have a look at a few other people doing it as well, here's Vitali, and he makes a more pronounced step against Andrea there, but it has all the same principles, and that's Anna's Triqui, where it is, as you say, just that little bit of an adjustment. It can be both feet moving or just the front foot moving into the distance, but then when the other person doesn't react, the distance is short. And you can see there's plenty of testing there where the person has reacted, we won't go yet. Or you're setting that rhythm of, I won't do anything. I won't do anything.
Yeah, you just see it there at the start. And that's a great point, because it's not something you just come out with all of a sudden. It's something that you kind of need to set up throughout the match.
Yeah.
That you need to be always testing in that range, in, out, like that push-pull that we talked about earlier. And that sets it up for when you need to use it and when the opportunity arises. It's not something that you can just all of a sudden use. You need to be setting up that rhythm the whole time in order to break that rhythm.
And something that particularly we say Colm might be a little bit of an exception here, but when you're looking at Vitali and when you're looking at Annie's, most of the work is being done throughout the match with the front leg. And the rhythms that are set are about controlling space and controlling distance with the front leg, and that sets the kind of the opponent's mind onto, okay, I'm watching for this leg, I'm watching for a different threat. And so very occasionally dropping the blitz in there means, because you haven't been preparing for it, you haven't seen it too much in the match, when you do throw it, if it's the right moment, it's really, really hard to stop. And then the flip side of it, then when you have someone like Colm who uses it extensively, it's coming, but the rhythm control that's needed then is exceptional. But it's knowing that it's coming doesn't mean you know when it's coming. Exactly,
yeah, and it's like we said earlier, to the untrained eye, it looks very simple and it's straightforward enough. You just rush forward with your hands, but there's so much going on like under the hood, as we said, like that he's setting up with rhythm, distance, all these other things, timing, the whole lot of it, and he's setting this up the whole time throughout the match. So some people might say, it looks quite easy, but there's a lot going on, and we can see small little things there. For example, like the front foot turning would be one example. So as you see, you might see it in this clip actually, as he tests, watch his front foot, it goes from side facing, so side facing, side facing, side facing, and then you see as he blitzes, it goes side to full. So see that little switch, and that switch is his body position to allow him to get that clear, direct punch, backhand, especially over for Colm with the backhand. So it makes it very, very clear. For here in Vitali, you can see the exact same thing. The front foot goes from side facing to full facing, but it allows him to use the front hand very clearly.
Yeah, and I mean, we will see that difference in terms of two things, but in terms of what happens if you stay too side facing, and we can see that happening to people every now and again. And we have a little bit of clip to show that later on. And then also the what happens when you don't set the rhythm first, and when you're not breaking a rhythm that you've set for yourself and you fall into your opponent's rhythm, you get caught. And we have a couple of examples of that later as well. So we've just two different setups that we've pulled out just to highlight, and two kind of slightly different variations in terms of setting up the blitz, one from Anis and one from Vitali.
Yeah, so the thing with this is once you begin to train this and you get comfortable with it, it's almost a feel thing. that you'll be able to push, pull, use those test steps, and then all of a sudden you just get a feel that the rhythm, the timing, the distance is correct, and that gives you an opportunity to really launch into it, because you can see it here. It's just like relax, and then that blitz just it's a feel almost, because everything just it gives you the green light. It's just it's an internal, almost subconscious thing that you just push, pull, and then all of a sudden everything just opens up, and it's a feel. So it takes a lot of practice to get this down and to get it correct.
Yeah, and I mean, on this one we can see the pulling of the front foot just to change the body angle. And like, one of the things that, if you're running upright, it's not going to work well, and you'll find yourself eating a lot of side kicks. And a slightly different one, now normally we'd see, if you're going to start to the body, we'd usually see it with the backhand first. But again, what it does in terms of starting body before coming up to the head is it does change that body angle and brings you in lower. And, depending on what your opponent's preferred counter is, I mean, if they're looking to, would say, hook as they change angle or something like that, or if they're looking to kick to the head, coming in low sometimes cuts off the chamber, cuts off the leg before it can lift. And it, again, coming in low sometimes means you're under that lead hand, and then you're coming up in between the rhythms. So you're coming up to the head as their lead hand is coming back after the first shot. And it makes it difficult to counter. So whether you're pulling your front foot to set your momentum forward, or you're going to the body first to get your body inclined forward, that's something as well that you can play with as a training tool, because one of the things that people find when they start training the blitz is they hesitate, and in hesitating you get countered a lot more, and then it makes you less inclined to want to train it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because when you're not good at it and you don't break the rhythm well, you get kicked enough. You get back kicks and you get side kicks quite a bit. So I think both of...
And that's a great point you made as well, because even using that backhand to set it up, you'll find most often when people use a blitz, the referees will only give them one clear point for that.
Yeah.
So whether it's the front hand, the backhand, it'll be whichever one is very... almost a long visible score for the referees. So if you can use the backhand to set that up, and come, you see here from Anis, so he'll use the backhand to the body, the front hand to the body just to come through. And then 1, 2, and that sets up that last one, backhand, which is a little bit more direct. So that's kind of the idea that these guys are going with here, to set it up to get one clear score. So Vitali goes the opposite way. He's going directly with the front hand to get that one direct clear score here.
Definitely. And I mean, it is a matter of preference sometimes as well, in terms of which way you start it, whether it's the front jab or the front backhand that starts it, or, again, going with that longer backhand. And we'll see some different examples of that as well. Just and I will pull in a couple of examples then where there's a crossover step used, but just a couple of examples here, different examples from some of the guys, to kind of highlight, just even if it isn't textbook, it still has huge value. You can see there being a little bit too sideways for Ahamed there.
And there's, you can see the difference there of the side on, kind of almost there's like, here's like a sprinting kind of a step, so it's like what you'd expect from a sprinter coming out of the blocks, where they're going directly forward. And then you see from the guys who kind of favour that little more side on stance, they'll almost kind of like drift into it. So you see right here, he's not really a sprint, he's just kind of lunging the body forward. So there's a little bit of a difference in the two types, where you see here it's just almost like a drift forward into it, where your body weight will carry you through, where the other type is like here from Zook, it's almost like a sprinter's starting position. It is,
and mechanically it just means your whole body weight is behind that. The difficulty being, of course, sometimes you'll end up body to body with no actual score, because you can see it in even in Zook's case, where the hands are low and closer to the body as the technique starts. So often the thing is, you've committed your body, but if the arms aren't in time with it, you don't get the arm extended, and then you end up with body to body. Now, he managed to bump there. We didn't call it bump. If you get the momentum on it, get the other person to move back, and you get them into distance, and that can work for you as well.
Yeah, and we can see the difference on the front hand as well is from Ahamed there, because he's a little bit more sideways. It's almost a back fist.
Has to
see here, it's a back fist that he's starting with.
Yeah.
Because he's so much side on, where Zook is a bit more direct, so he's coming with a front hand, which is almost more like a traditional jab. So that would be the difference, whether you're going from a side on stance or that little bit more forward facing. But either way, you're going to have to still adjust as you come through to open up the backhand. So no matter what happens, as you begin your first initial one, that front foot must turn to create a forward step.
Just threw these ones in here now as well, where we have a crossing step, which is a little bit more rare. But looking at a couple of the bigger guys doing this now in the 78s and plus 85s, where the way of getting the body weight forward, there's a different prep for it, but it's bringing the back leg entirely through with the backhand. And again, that's very popular in karate. So
yes.
It's a different kind of step. There is a counter from Anti, but you can see it used with some effect.
Absolutely. And this type of step actually gives you one distinct advantage in that you can actually see it here. It sets up the kick off the back leg, because we'll see it in a further clip as we go through, but your front foot will come in and it's almost staying there, and then the back leg takes over the carrying of your body weight and your momentum, which allows the back leg to then set up and have the correct distance for you to set up that back leg turning kick to the body or to the head. Whereas other fighters, we'll see it in a further clip in the next one, they actually get so close by coming in with the feet on the front foot especially.
Yeah, it traps you.
The front foot gets so close that they get trapped and they don't have the correct space to get off any continuation score.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things as well, I suppose, if you're incredibly one-sided, it's a nice option as well, because you're starting with your preferred leg in front, and you're probably, after you step through, going to finish with your preferred leg throwing the kick as well. So, plus the fact that throughout the course of most matches, people don't change legs much. So when you're looking to work out your defense effectively against these, your opponent is changing their facing as they come in, which can make it very, very difficult to make the right kick. So it'll often mean then you'll pick up, maybe for example, you could pick up a turning kick or a back kick, and it's going on to the wrong side, it's at the wrong angle. So it is interesting, and you can see it from Antti Rintinen there, where he uses it in the next clip, kind of, it lets him step through and around the front leg, to where, and the back kick then is kind of, it is the right choice, but it's just the angle is wrong for it. But it gives you an interesting way to kind of almost step through a leg. So I don't know if we'd, classically call it a blitz, but it has all of the characteristics. I mean, it is a direct attack to hands from distance, and it's just a different step to get you there. I
guess this would almost fall in with the sprinter type one that we discussed earlier, as opposed to the traditional point fighting type blitz.
The hop.
Yeah.
So a few times it doesn't work, and this was just such a profound one. It was like, well, yeah, that's unfortunate, but there's a good reason that each of these doesn't work, and maybe worth kind of pointing them out, and not working in terms of being countered or just not getting your score, which when you've done all the work is kind of unfortunate.
Like even this one from Tural here is an example of what we talked about earlier, of not giving yourself that correct distance to set up the kick. So actually being too close is a problem as well, because not only are you not getting any traction, chances are you're going to be so close that it turns into it almost like a messy scramble situation, and it's going to end up in maybe you falling over or you losing balance, for example. So right here, like, because the body position is so close, you won't be able to set up that kick at the end of it. Unlike the other examples that we've seen, and here you see the same idea. The body position just carries through your opponent too far, and you end up just losing balance, especially with the serious momentum you're carrying forward in that position. This one here from the Welsh competitor, you see that there's no real setup of it. He just launches into it, and that's easy to counter at this high level.
Yeah, I think Tural, his back foot there steps too far, so even if he had more of a skipping step, he might be all right. For Ahamed there, I think he's actually just ended up, because he's that sideways, every now and again it's possible that you end up inside your partner, or your opponent on the wrong side, and it just means then a hook is super effective. A little bit of a step to the outside is effective, and you trip over yourself. So your opponent's body pretty much just deflects you because you're so side facing, you end up kind of bumping into them and tripping over your front leg, and that can happen every now and again. As you said,
that's certainly one of the potential problems, definitely with the side facing style.
Yeah, no, I mean the blitz there was just, I do think, was a case of being in the wrong rhythm. So like, you definitely want to set your own rhythm and then break it rather than following your opponent's rhythm, and I think that's where that can cause definitely some problems. Speaking of just that setting of rhythm, we just left this clip with Colm and Colm there, and like all things, when you take out the highlights, it'll look good for one and not the other, but you can see the amount of work that Colm has to do to set up the shot against Colm. Like Colm has all of the advantages of range, and so Colm has to take control of rhythm. He can't control range fully, or he has to. What he has to do is take control of range in the long run. But it is that element of, if he doesn't control the range and rhythm, Colm has natural advantages there, and he's going to ride that all the way to the finish. So the work that Colm had to do to get control of that range, control of that rhythm, and then break it for his advantage was huge.
Yeah, and this is something that we mentioned earlier. You need to set it up. You need to use the whole 4 minutes to set and break this rhythm consistently. And then what that does is it actually gives you one of the 3 things we've discussed in previous episodes, of either having the ring position, having the distance control, or having tempo control. So here you see Collie is really in control of not only the distance, because it's at his discretion where he wants to be, he's also in control of the tempo and the rhythm, which is very, very important. So then he can manipulate the both of those to his advantage, which you can see he does quite effectively. I think it's worth noting as well on Collie's ones here that he gets very nice traction on his reverse hand. So right here, it comes straight through the middle, and it's very, very clear. So he uses his backhand really, really well, where a lot of other people will use their front hand to get the initial score. His backhand usually sets them up really, really well. And if he doesn't get a clean blitz, what usually you'll notice is that he actually can set up the kick quite easily off the end of it. So like we discussed earlier, because you'll see it just as this clip rolls through, as he tests in where one, he sets the rhythm, he's test and go. And now because he's on the other side, that sets up the back leg for a kick to the body. So maybe he didn't get a clean blitz with the hands there, but it would have set up another score.
I think that footwork as well, and particularly positioning himself outside of his opponent's front leg as well. He squares up the body. He has the skip step there to make sure he gets his front leg out of his own way. And then, as you said, he's available then to actually finish with the kick. And I think his inside movement as well is important. I think a huge problem that people have when they're blitzing is it's very all or nothing. Is if it connects well, the opponent moves back, you get your space, you get your ring advantage, maybe there's a warning for travelling, you get your score, and it's all in your favour. But the second somebody just shifts their head out of the way, or they just stand their ground or move in awkwardly, or something happens, sometimes then it's just down to the referee of, well, who was at fault for the for that, should there be a warning here? And you're almost relying on the referee to break, and then you go again, and you've missed out on the advantage of all of that rhythm that you've set and then broken to get into this blitz. And I think the skill that you need to follow it on is, once you get that initial shot to land, you've got to be at the right distance so that you can actually do something from there. And I think that's one of the things that will separate people who are getting clear and clean scores off their blitz from people who are getting contact but not necessarily the maximum output from it.
Yeah, as we mentioned earlier, one of the highlights of having an effective blitz is having your opponent in no man's land for a split second, and that's all it takes. So essentially, the idea is that you're scoring, they're not scoring. So some people, they will commit to the blitz, but with the idea of that, okay, if somebody hits me, I'm still going to get my shots in. But you'll notice that the top guys, they will play this in terms of, they will set it up so they're in a position to take the advantage where their opponent is not.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the highlights that we've just seen in the recent clips there.
Absolutely. So I suppose when you bring this back to the club and you start training it, do you still include training for the blitz, or do you think that's a relic of the last 5 or 6 years and it's going to go away?
Do you know, I think the technique itself is always going to be something that's prevalent in our sport, particularly because it's going from that range, as we said earlier, that kicking range, and transitioning through medium to short range. But I think the more important things here are the general principles, like the setting, the rhythm, the footwork, the test steps, all these things. And it's very, very important that your students understand this, because maybe it might not be part of their game, but if you don't train these particular situations and sequences, when they come up against an opponent who can do that, then they're going to be in big trouble, because they haven't been exposed to it before. So I think training this and understanding the rhythm, understanding the different things that we taught through there today, I think that's very, very important for all ITF fighters, no matter whether the blitz stays, whether it becomes relevant, irrelevant, it doesn't matter. The guiding principles is what is much more important for me.
And I think there's a different component to it as well that's going to stay relevant, which is that, in ITF, maybe uniquely, because we have team sparring and you have the possibility of big mismatches, it's one of those levelers where, if you're the smaller fighter, you need something. And, in years gone by, it was the jumping punch. But you're not going to match legs with a taller fighter who can kick. So
especially when you have that advantage of being as you said, the small, nimble guy, of having that speed advantage.
Yeah, and I think that's another one as well where we didn't have too many great examples of it in this particular series of clips. It was actually difficult to find some good examples. I've seen it in person. But I haven't actually found the fights with the clips. But starting to the body with the backhand as you're stepping outside of the front leg, so kind of cutting off the taller person's front leg as you step through to the body, and then come up to the head as you get closer and your body gains height. I think that's such a huge technique as well when you're sparring those taller guys, or when you're blitzing the taller guys, because you're coming in from under their natural height. They're having to try to kick down anyway. They're punching down. They're at kind of an awkward position, trying to adjust what they do. And I think some of the big guys are used to it and they do that well, but a lot of them, it's not where they usually have to react. So I think just adding that into your repertoire is something that's really useful if you see yourself as team sparring and you're not in one of the taller or heavier weight classes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely as a weapon of choice. It's definitely something that you want to have in your toolkit, whether it's something that you have at the forefront of your game or not. It doesn't matter. It's something that you need to have and understand, more importantly. So whether you have it at the forefront or not isn't so as important as understanding the principles that set it up and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that's us for this week.
Yeah. That was a good one. I enjoyed this one. It was definitely a technique that we've seen a lot, especially maybe in the last decade in ITF sparring. So it's for a while it was something that was just creeping through. Then people begin to understand it a little bit more, and then as a result of that, we can kind of see it fading out a little bit now. But that's how it works. It goes in cycles, don't it?
Absolutely.
See these techniques come back around again.
Yeah, and it's good to remember that, and keep the techniques sharp, even the ones that you're not using all of the time or that don't fit into the competitive meta at the moment, and just use that as a history lesson or as a reminder. We can see that the front leg fencing wasn't such a thing a few years ago, and it has very much come back, and that's advantaged taller fighters, which is going to mean that smaller fighters are going to have to adapt and change, which might mean back to more movement, more angular shots, and the blitz might be a part of how smaller fighters come back into it and beat these tall leggy guys.
Yeah, and it just goes back to that what we said earlier. It's understanding principles is more important rather than the what, the why. So the more why you understand, then you can fit your own mold into that much more effectively.
Perfect.
Yeah, so make sure and hit the video like it if you enjoyed that one, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And as always, any suggestions, make sure and drop them into the comment box, and stay tuned for next week.
Well, until next week, best of luck.